Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason. I'm one of the pastors here at C3. Good to have you on board. We're starting a new series today called How to Forgive. And I get to kick this off. I don't always do that, but we're just going to dive right into the deep end with this one on how to forgive God. I always get the easy ones, don't I? My sixth grader has learned a dirty word this year at school. It starts with an A, 7 letters long, and it is this word. I knew once he came home and learned that word, our home was never going to be the same. If you've been down this road, you know that your world kind of changes when this word shows up, because up until this point, math, as you know it, has been pretty straightforward. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, all using actual numbers. And then algebra shows up and messes with it all, because you start getting questions like this one that we had on his homework. Evaluate the expression 4a minus 8 plus 7a plus 5, 4a equals 6. Why are there letters in math now? And what does evaluate the expression means? I had to ask the teacher on that one, but only after we got the answers back, and we got it wrong, because this is what I helped him answer. I evaluate this expression as stupid. You want my evaluation? There it is. Well, it turns out evaluate means solve. And I'm like, well, why didn't you just say solve? Save us all the heartache. We all want things to make sense. And not just in math, but in life, we grow up needing to make sense of things, for there to be some order in the midst of what appears to be chaos. And as parents, if you have kids, or grandparents, if you're raising little ones, you understand the importance of trying to give children solid footing. And so things need to be fairly concrete for them to understand. And it's not wrong for us to be able to say, well, this is right, and this is wrong, and this is always the way it is. And sometimes we get into what I call Christian karma. Well, if you do good and do the right things and don't mess up too bad and all this stuff, then you're going to have good things happen to you. Don't we hear this? Don't we teach this even sometimes? And I'm not here to diss all of it, but what I'm saying is if as we grow up, we understand that there are some variables that show up that make the math really stupid, that mess with our worldview, because indeed you can live by a certain set of values and morals and do all the right things and not use the bad words and all this stuff, and things bad still happen beyond your control. Some of you have experienced those things. Many of you have experienced those things, and it's really, really disruptive to our worldview. And it can really, really mess with our faith if you have God on board, if you're trying to learn about the ways in which God behaves or takes care of us. And I thought it always worked like this, and then all of a sudden something goes off script and completely messes with the math. And so it's important for us to just acknowledge that right on the front end, because that's what we want to talk about today as we dive into this. To try and cut past the variables, not to always be able to say, well, A equals this and B equals this and all of that, but to really get to the heart of some things that go on inside of us, that if we can't talk about them as believers or on a journey of faith in a Christian community, then we've done you a great disservice. So here's the first question that shows up for a lot of people that we need to just acknowledge, the why question. Why do certain things happen? If you have not asked that question, I'm not exactly sure you're alive. It's important for us to explore and to ask the why questions, not just about how things work, but why doesn't this set of circumstances fit the mold? Well, I sit with people all the time who are in the midst of a very difficult situation, and it is natural to ask why, to try and make some sense of things. Why did my spouse get cancer? Why did my child get this? Why did this tsunami wipe out a bunch of, name it. You can't even pick up the newspaper and really not engage this question, okay? If you're honest. Now, if you're coming in here trying to be pretentious, like, oh, I have all the answers and I've memorized the Bible and here, let me fix your problem, you're going to be very dissatisfied with this talk. I'll just tell you right now, okay? But it's important for us to ask the why question. Here's the problem, is that we're not guaranteed answers to that question, ever. It's important to ask, but I can't find anything in there that says that you are guaranteed answers to your why questions. There aren't always solutions to the problems that demand the question of why. And answers don't even solve the problem, even when you can have them sometimes. It doesn't bring your dead one back to life to have the answer as to why they died. They're still gone. And you still have work to do on the other side of that. Well, that creates a spiritual crisis. And it is centered around this very important question, too, as we think about faith and a loving God and all of these good things, is when bad things happen, and there really isn't any rhyme or reason to it, and the math is all messed up, does God even care? Have I been misled about who this God is? Because if he's good, he's certainly not just. And if he's just, he's certainly not good. Because of what we see that doesn't fit the mold. You see where I'm going with this? We just got to be honest about those things. And I've got the degrees, I've asked the questions. I'm just telling you that this question doesn't go away because bad things still continue to happen. Even if you have said yes to Jesus, bad things will continue to happen around you or in your very life. And you just need to acknowledge that that is part of our reality. Suffering is common to the human experience, okay? I don't like that. I'm not here to tell you different. I'm just telling you that's the way it is. And so we have to do something with that because we're calling into question the very goodness of God. And that's big stuff. It may not feel like very safe territory. Maybe you're coming in here going, no, I just want you to give me the answers. And I don't think that that's what church does best. I think what we ought to do is to have conversation about the things that are unanswerable and to look beyond the answers to something greater. And that's what I want to do with us today. Because if all you're doing is searching for answers to things, you're going to have an emotional reaction to that. And you're going to have very strong feelings that if you don't do the work, those feelings are going to turn into facts. And you've met people just like I have who are very bitter and very cynical and say, look, see that bad thing happen? God can't be real. God can't be loving. God can't be there for us. God can't really care. He's vindictive. He's whatever. He's got a sick sense of humor. All of these kinds of things. You've heard people who have weaponized their pain. They have weaponized their grief, and they'll take any chance they can to shoot you down and to get you off track too. You know these people. Maybe you are one of these people. But there's another group of people too who instead of daring to say, God, this might have something to do with you, they will take the burden on themselves. And that's called shame. They will literally take responsibility for something that was not their fault upon themselves and feel shame like I did something wrong. We're going to talk about a specific example of what that looks like in a little bit. And that's what people who don't weaponize their grief, they internalize the responsibility for something that they had no control over. They turn blame into shame. Neither way is going to work, okay? I want to dispel that right now because if that's something you're latching onto, I'm telling you that there's a better way. And so that's really what we want to look at because we need to ask the question, what do you do when what's broken can't be fixed? And maybe you've tried fixing something and you have discovered the hard way that not everything can be fixed. And you feel like God is at fault. If you're honest, okay? God could have done something about this situation, and maybe he was asleep that day, he did not intervene, and the bad thing happened anyways. Or this good thing could have happened, and God somehow, fell asleep at the wheel and prevented that good thing. There's nobody else to pin it on, right? God could have done something, and he didn't, okay? If you have not had that thought, well, I'm guessing, I'm up here today because I think you have had that thought. I think every one of us at some point have said, have I fallen for something here that's just not true? And so we need to explore that, okay? This is a good place for us to explore that, not to pretend like we have it all figured out. I'm not up here today because I think I have it all figured out. I want us to be able to ask some better questions. And here's where we need to start. I know we labeled the talk today, How to Forgive God. Well, I'm here to tell you that I'm not going to teach you how to forgive God. Because according to the Bible, you can't. You can't forgive God. At no time in your life is he going to come and ask for your apology. He's not going to say, oh, I know, I'm sorry. It's not going to happen, okay? You can't forgive God because he's not going to ask for it. But instead, I want to show you a path toward getting what I believe God really wants you to have in the first place. It's what you really need. And it's not answers, and it's not reasons, it's not even purpose to bad things and to suffering, or an apology. It's something greater than that that helps bridge the gap when we're in this space of dealing with something that we did not ask for. If I was going to sum it up today, God's big idea, based on a scripture that we're going to look at today, here's the truth I want us to think about for a little bit. Letting go of your pain leaves room for God's peace. I believe this is what the human heart is after. Because even if you have answers, if you don't have peace, there's a missing piece. I talk to people, sit with families at the end of life all the time, and this is what they talk about at the end. A sense of peace, not of having solutions, not having every wrong righted, not all, a sense of peace. And that's a deep inner spiritual thing that God provides and wants us to have. So let's, instead of figuring out how to forgive God, it's going to, it's like a theological Saw movie, I was thinking. It's just not going to go well to entertain that conversation. Let's think about this for a little bit. And we're going to do so by looking at the story of the life of Job, the book of Job. Alexa's not very helpful on this one because she pronounces it Job. So maybe if you're going to do a little searching on your own, say, hey, Alexa, what can you tell me about Job? And she might be a little more helpful. But I want to tell you, we're not going to read the whole story. The book of Job is like 40 chapters long. I'm going to try and summarize a little bit. If you're not familiar with the story of Job, Job is introduced in the book of Job, written probably about 600 years before Christ, but it was considered to be a much older story than that. Even I've heard the word folk tale, which might mess with your understandings of how the Bible came together and all this stuff. But Job was a real person who lived a very long time ago. And the way the story is told, Job had it pretty good. Had a wife, big family, lots of property, was a righteous person, really intent on pleasing God. And all of a sudden, after we get this sort of glowing report about Job, we flip up to this scene. It's happening in some kind of heavenly courtroom where God is there and the angels and Satan shows up. I don't know if he was invited or not, but he shows up. And God's like, well, where you been? He's like, oh, just roaming the earth, which of course means being up to no good, because that's what he does. And God says, if you read the story, God says, well, have you considered Job? Now, if I'm Job and I know that this is going on upstairs, my first thought is, wait a minute, what? Why are you picking out me? Leave me alone. I'm Satan. He says, have you considered Job? He's a pretty good dude. And Satan says, well, of course he is. You hooked him up. He's got everything he needs. What if you took some of that stuff away? How would his faith be then? And God says, okay. Have your way. Don't hurt him. Don't kill him. But you go for it, and we'll see. And so that's what happens. And the way it happens in the story is that messenger after messenger comes to Job with the worst news imaginable. Any one of these would ruin your year. And he gets about 7 of them, one right after the other. Hey, Job, a wind came and blew your house down and killed all your family. And oh, by the way, all your livestock. And oh, by the way, this. And oh, by the way, this. And lost everything in a matter of minutes as these messengers come and give Job the damage report of what Satan's been up to. Job is decimated. But the story, according to the story, says he did not sin. We get these words, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Oh, man, that's good stuff. Thanks for that, Job. Now, Doesn't say if Job actually meant that, but he said it and held firm. He says Job didn't sin in any of his response to all of these bad things that had happened to him. Good for Job. Somehow that wasn't good enough for Satan. Can you imagine that? Satan's persistent. He wants you to fail. You know that, right? And so he goes back up to God and says, well, yeah, because you didn't let me touch him. And God says, okay, have at him. Don't kill him. And so the way the story is told, Satan comes back down, and Job's body from head to toe is inflicted with open running sores. Now, sorry, right before lunch, that's not the greatest picture. Some of you have had some type of skin things that are very painful. You got to do wound care and all this stuff. You keep wanting to show me when I come to your hospital room, and I'm here to tell you I don't want to see that stuff anymore. It's gross. But I can appreciate that it's painful and that it's a nuisance and that you wish it would go away. Job had whatever that was from head to toe, and it says the only way he could get relief from it was to take a broken piece of pottery. This one's on loan from one of our fellow staff members here. It is thousands of years old. I've been asked to take good care of it, so I'm going to. It's the handle of a broken piece of pottery, and as you can see, it's got sharp edges on it. It says the only way Job could find relief from his pain was to use one of these to scrape at the wounds. Some of you know about cutting. And the backstory I hear from those who do that or have entertained that thought is that the pain you feel inside is so great that the only way you think you can get relief is to literally cut your skin. The pain of the wound, the pain that you're inflicting on yourself somehow releases the pain inside. This is what the Bible says Job did to himself to find some relief. Can you imagine? Those were going to leave scars on him the rest of his life, even after the wounds healed. Do you understand that kind of pain? This was a guy who had it all together, and in a matter of moments, it was all gone, and he is broken, completely broken, and he's using the broken pottery to try and get some relief from the pain he is in. He is humiliated. He is really just at his lowest. At which point, his wife comes in, his helpful, loving wife, and says, well, why don't you just curse God and die? Thanks, honey. Get right on that. Job says, what? God can only give me the good stuff and not the bad? I mean, he could have said a lot of things, but that's what he said. But he sits down in a pile of ashes, a pitiful character. Well, like any good, upstanding person, Job has friends who may have liked Job because he had money and stuff. But they come and they see him and they just wail because they don't even recognize him. Now, some of this is cultural in Jewish culture, even way back then. They came and they sat with him, something called Shiva, which basically means they just sat in silence with him. They tore their clothes, but they didn't say anything. For 7 days, they sat with him and just in the pitiful shape that he was in. Well, that's all well and good. That's kind of like the Jewish version of bringing a casserole and a get well card, okay? That was expected. 7 days feels like a long time, but what did they have to do? So they're sitting around there for 7 days, and that's fine. That's actually pretty close to the beginning in this whole story. Where Job starts to get long-winded is these friends open their mouths and start talking and talking and talking, and they take turns talking, and they won't shut up with their answers and their quotes and their slogans and their theology and their doctrine and their orthodox, their party line, basically saying, Job, everybody's poop stinks, and you're no different. Somehow, some way, this all comes back to you. God is not on trial here. And so already Job is in a pitiful situation. Can you imagine? And then he's got his friends coming in and piling on more. And so he has to spend a bunch of time not only in his own misery, but trying to defend himself against these friends because he's resolute on the fact that I didn't do anything to deserve this. Have you ever felt that way? Are you honest enough to admit that some things have come your way that you did not deserve? Plain and simple. Now, you can paint a Bible verse on it or whatever, but you cannot sit here and tell me that there hasn't been something happen to you where you feel like, I didn't earn that. And that can twist you a certain way, okay? Job, he's not wrong in what he's doing. He's trying to get this stuff out, but his friends are not helping because they're trying to take the burden away from God. They're trying to prevent Job from duking this out with God. Job's the only person in this exchange who talks directly to God, by the way. Everybody's just talking about God. Can I caution you with something? If you have friends that all they do is talk about God to you, you should probably leave those people alone. I want to be around people who talk to God and who will talk to me a certain way. And I'm going to tell you about that here in just a second. But his friends just didn't help. And they wouldn't go away. They wouldn't leave. They just kind of hung around. It's like, you guys, you're just not making things better. So Job has to press through all of this. And through all of these arguments, basically, which keep happening and happening and happening, Job goes through a process that I want us to pay attention to, because I think in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our confusion, in the midst of our grief and our loss and our sufferings, this is something that we are allowed to do and perhaps given the impetus and the permission to go through. And it is this: how did Job let go of his pain? This is for us as well. Here's what he did. By leaning into his brokenness. He had to lean into it, okay? The whole naked I came from my mother's womb, that stuff wore off very quickly for him. And most of the book of Job is him pouring. He curses his own birthday. Who does that? You got to be feeling pretty awful to sit there and say, I wish I was never born. This is where he's at. These are very dangerous. Have you sat with somebody? I hear more swear words at the moment when somebody finds out that their loved one is gone and not coming back. I do not blame them for being that. They're letting it out. They just need to let it out. He leaned into his brokenness. He did not pretend that things were other than they were. He did not try and put a happy face on everything and say, oh, I'm going to get through this. No, he was miserable. And the Bible, I believe, uses that as a template for many of the other books. There's even a book called Lamentations, to lament. We don't like to be around people who lament. They're real downers. But you know what? They probably have a good reason. And what they need is your presence and a certain way to be with that so that they can do the work they need to do. And if you're in that place and you're tired of pretending that things are other than what they are, maybe this is what you need to do, is to follow Job. So I want to encourage you to go back and kind of read some of what he says. Don't worry about the friends just yet, but read what he says if you're in that place where you need kind of a model or an example for how to go through that. Just got done reading a book by Lisa Turkhurst, I think I got her last name right there, called Forgiving What You Can't Forget. Here's what Lisa says. It's real important. It becomes hard to pretend with others when we can no longer pretend with ourselves. Now that's something you got to do in the mirror. You got to look at yourself, regardless of whatever anybody else says, regardless of who you're following on Pinterest, all that stuff, to look in your own mirror at your own face and say, am I kidding myself? Am I pretending that things are not as bad as what they seem? It's really awkward to do that. I'm not asking you to do something easy. I'm asking you to do something important. Because if you sit there and just kind of try and keep all that at bay, keep it all at bay, oh, it's not going to affect me, you're going to get tired and it's just going to keep pressing in. You cannot look at the news and not be affected in some way with all of that, okay? You have to be able to let down your guard and to process it in a way that actually helps you. But it's not by trying to make things better. It's not by popping a pill or trying to numb your pain or watching more, Netflix or whatever, to numb it out, okay? This is what our society tries to tell us to do. Oh, just go on the next adventure and take this and smoke this and whatever. This stuff wears out, okay? You have to lean into your brokenness and quit trying to pretend that things are different. So I got a reminder of this from a very important conversation I had with a nurse friend named Aggie, who's a labor and delivery nurse here in town. She also deals with families who have experienced infant loss, fetal demise, really, really hard stuff. Breaks my heart every time to be in those places. But she says, and to me, that's the epitome of a bad thing happening that you didn't ask for and that you don't feel like you deserve. She says, what people need in those points is to have their grief acknowledged. They need to have their pain and their grief acknowledged, not fixed. You can't fix it. To have that grief and pain acknowledged. She says the best way to do it is just pull up a chair and to say things like, I'm so sorry that this happened. Do you want to talk about it? Well, who wants to talk about something like that? They do. Because it validates the fact that something awful has happened and I need to get it out. It is tough, tough stuff. Because the easy thing to do would be to come in and go, thus saith the Lord, and hope your day's better. That shuts the conversation down, I'll tell you right now. Those are the people who will internalize and think, it must have been my fault because the priest or the pastor or the whatever came in and said some nice Bible verses and made it feel like it was my fault. We got to have a different way to attend to people. We got to ask questions. Because telling the story is part of the healing. Did you know that every one of those families that I've ever been around holds that baby as long as they can? They look at that baby. I've never been with a family that hadn't already given that baby a name. It's wonderfully awful. It's all together, right? But this is what helps, is to lean into that brokenness. Now, extrapolate that out on any other bad circumstance in life. If you can muster up the faith, that word's going to come up again, to go there, you're going to find that letting go of your pain is what leads to God's peace. Not answers, not solutions, not happy outcomes, not any of that stuff. It leads to God's peace. Well, by the time we get to the end of the book, everybody's advice is kind of worn off. And by chapter 38, God shows up in a whirlwind. I think the whirlwind is a nice way of saying all those guys' hot air created a storm. And God said enough, and he shows up. But he doesn't show up with happy talk. Chapter 38, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man. I will question you, and you shall declare to me. This was not George Burns' buddy God coming in going, hey, Job, rough day. No. He says, look, I get it. You want to ask some questions? That's fine. Now, big boy, suit up, because I got some questions for you. And he begins to roll out a nature lesson that would put David Attenborough and Carl Sagan and all those guys on their heels. What's curious to me is that God spent a really long time not talking. In your life, I want you to consider the fact that God's silence does not mean God's absence. It is possible for God to be silent in your life and very present. Is that possible? Can you entertain that notion what would that do for you? To know that perhaps just because God is not speaking loudly, that he's not missing out on what's going on in your life. But as God talks and asks all these rhetorical questions, where were you when I formed the earth and spoke and the galaxies became, and the oceans and the mountains and Behemoth and Leviathan, basically all the things you can't explain, the nature lesson of the seas and the birds and all these things. Job gets a picture of what it's like to be God. God is revealing himself personally to Job. This is part of the process. When God speaks is not to say, oh, they're there. It's like, no, who are you? Where were you? I haven't lost a handle on things. Don't you understand what it is I'm up to here? And Job's perspective begins to broaden. And his suffering begins to be put in perspective. Not that it's not suffering, but that there's a whole lot more going on than what he considered. And what that leads him to is not shame, is not guilt, is not bitterness, nor does it lead to answers or an apology. It leads Job to worship. Look at what it says in chapter 42, as God has had his chance to speak. Job answered the Lord, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand. Things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you will declare to me. I had heard of you by hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Isn't that what worship is? Seeing God for who he really is. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. He actually made himself lower because he understood that God was not at fault, that God was going to take care of him and everybody else because God is God. Who is God in your world? Are you God? Do you try to be? You will wear yourself out until you come to the understanding that we are human and God is God. He is sovereign over all. He does not ask for advice or opinions or correction or all that stuff. We don't like his management style sometimes. He does not care about your opinion of him. He's up to something, and he loves you, and he cares. What's interesting is that as Job goes through this process, he begins to accept what has happened to him as a reality, not because there are reasons for it. He understands that his faith has grown as he repents, and he finds God's peace. That's what he gets at the end of all of this, is peace. And because he did, God says, Job, would you go and pray for your friends? Because you got it right and they got it wrong. It validates what Job, not only what he went through, but how he went through it. And if that's what God is validating for them, this story was told to a whole group of people who were supposed to learn from this is how I can get through my stuff, not by pretending everything's okay, but by acknowledging my pain for what it is and being around people who will help me get it out so that I can have God's peace, shalom, this thing inside me that even in the midst of storms helps to right everything else. Today I can guarantee somebody in here has a beef with God, whether you'll admit it or not. I don't know you, but I know that somebody in here does. And you either need him to make sense because something bad has happened and that's why you're here, is you need to find the chapter and verse that makes it all better, or you need someone to pay. And that's where the good news comes in, is because he already did. Jesus coming to earth and dying on a cross for your sins and mine is payment for all the wrongs that we can't explain and all the bad that we can't undo and all the variables and all the bad math, the questions that on this side of eternity will go unanswered. The cross covers it all. Whatever your feelings about God this particular moment don't allow for, the work of Jesus on the cross can surely cover. It is the good news. It is God's grace. Grace means you don't have to know why to get better. You don't have to know why to get better. Jesus' work on the cross says, innocent as a lamb, I will stay here for you so that you know that God understands and that he will see you through. Letting go of your pain leaves room for God's peace. I wish there was another way. Viktor Frankl wrote this amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning. He's a Holocaust survivor. He says we gain meaning in life in one of three experiences: through work, through love, and through suffering. I wish that third one wasn't a part of it. Work and love, I can get away with those, but suffering, and not that we understand why we suffer, but in the midst of suffering, we get perspective on what's most important in our lives. And for that, I can be grateful. Let's wrap it up. You don't have to spend the rest of your life holding on to bitterness and blame because of your misfortune. You don't have to do that. Even when the math doesn't add up and you yourself might bear the scars of suffering, the most important thing for you to experience is a peace that passes all understanding. but you don't get to it, and you won't get through it without doing the work of building your faith. Don't you understand? That's why we make such a big deal about it around here. That's why we revamped the whole app, is so that you could have in the palm of your hand a pathway, something, a next step to build your faith, to grow daily in a deeper relationship with the source of peace. We don't want that to be a mystery to you. We want to give you some tangible steps to do that. And when you do that, no matter what, life can throw all kinds of curveballs at you. That peace won't just keep you afloat, won't just make for, better attitude or whatever. It's going to rebuild hope. It's going to heal hurts. It's going to mend relationships. It's going to ignite fires of freedom and worship. And until Christ returns to right all the wrongs, to clean up all the messes, all the things that break our heart, it will stand as irrefutable proof that our good God is still in control. Would you pray with me? God, I've been thinking about the old song I learned as a kid, when peace like a river attends my way, sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, you have taught me to say, it is well with my soul. How's that even possible, God? I think about the guy who wrote that, who lost his kids in a shipwreck. And as he's sailing by months later at the spot where they died, he wrote those words. How is that possible? That it can be well with our soul. God, we can only attribute that kind of comfort from knowing you, from wrestling with you, from daring to question, to challenge life's pains, not for the sake of finding answers, but for the sake of gaining your peace. God, if there are souls here today that are not at peace with you, that they would not rest until they find it. Not give up, not be discouraged, but to pursue it as if their very life depended upon it. And Lord, haste the day when my faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. God, thank you for your peace that defies logic, that goes way past our understanding. We need it, we need it, we need it. Thank you for giving it and never running out of it. We praise and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.